So here we go, error engagement. Why do I call it engagement? Because I'm trying to get students more active in their writing. Like we said, writing class should be more engaging. So, okay, you're all teachers, right? Okay, think about if you were an English teacher, if you were teaching English and you got this paper, what would you do? Read this paper first. What do you want to do to this paper? This? Perhaps, find the errors and correct it, right? And in Georgian too, we love our red pens. Do you love your red pen?
Yeah.
I love my red pen. Okay, and then we've all been students. What does a student do when we give it back?
Nothing.
Or, yeah, we throw it in the trash, or they just look for the grade, or they just, put it in their folder. Okay, so in the history of writing, this process has been the same. The teacher collects a work, she marks it, corrects it, she gives it back to the student puts it away or in the trash. All of history has been like this. You did this as a student and vice versa, vice versa. So the research says, of course, this doesn't work, but teachers still do this. We know it doesn't work, but we still do it. We still want to correct because we're teachers and we're always right. Right? Okay. So just as a reminder, I know that you know this, but more effective correction is when teacher gets the class to give the corrections. When the teacher gets peer editing. When the teacher gives clues but not direct editing. When the teacher gives meaningful practice. What's meaningful practice?
Explains the things behind.
Maybe students need less explanation and more doing it, right? Blogging or writing or just opportunities to use it instead of lecture and textbook practice. Okay, so of course teacher correcting everything, you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
I know you don't do that, okay? Can you believe there are a lot of teachers who still do this? They spend hours correcting. Can you believe it? It's true, right? We know this. And this is the strange thing. Even though we know the research, it's still very natural for teachers to go through essays and correct. It's in the system. Okay? So we want to try to change this and have it more of a circle. Okay, so students are writing, they're getting error guidance from their peers and from the teacher. Then they are interacting with errors. This is very important because students rarely interact with their errors. So I'm going to show you how they will do this. Okay, then reflect. Do you ever have your students reflect about their errors? Do they think about their mistakes and talk about them and write about them? Never, okay? Never, but this is such an important part of the process, okay? And then it continues. This is the way students learn from their mistakes. This is the only way. And how do I know this? Because I did this whole year. I've been trying this system. So, here are my goals. Last year I wanted to say I don't want to spend so much time editing papers because the students don't look at them and they don't learn from them. And I'm doing their work. Okay? So my goals. First goal was I wanted my students to be editors. Teach them how to be editors. Are your students good editors of their work?
They all
Usually they're not, right? They're usually not because they come from a system where the teachers have usually told them what the problem is. And so the students can be a little lazy. They don't have to look at their work very well. Okay? I want students to actively notice their error patterns. When a student gets a paper back and it's all red, what do they think about themselves as a writer? Yeah, they think, oh, I can't write. I'm a bad writer. Actually, most students only have 2 or 3 common problems that they always do. And if we can get them to notice that, they can work on those and fix them. They're not bad writers, they just have some patterns that they need to help and to fix. And if they can notice those patterns, they will improve. Maybe they'll have some new patterns, but that's improving, right? So we want to get them to notice those. Like I said, I want my students to be more active in their writing, in their drafts, not just blah, the minimum, give it to the teacher, like such a dead, uninterested thing. We want them to be active. I want to increase their autonomy to find their own errors. What do I mean by increase autonomy? What do you think I mean by that? Autonomy kind of means through the self, right? Yeah. So I want to increase their self-ability to find the errors before I do, to find their own. And then finally, all of these, I want to build their confidence as writers. Most of my students, because English is their second language, their English writing confidence is, I rarely have a student that says, I'm just a great English writer. Never, really. And even as Georgian students, do you have a lot of students who say, I'm a wonderful writer? Maybe every so often you'll have a few because they're good readers and they love to read and write. But that's the unusual exceptions. Usually they don't, especially with the world of texting and short messages. Okay? All right, so first thing I do is, these are the steps I go through when we're doing essays through the semester. We do 4 essays in a semester. We start off the first part of the classes. We start off with a essay style. For example, a narrative essay is what we usually start with, and maybe you start with this too. Okay, so I don't know, maybe you don't, but we teach writing style as we're learning to write the first essay, so they can work on that. Okay, so can you all be actors for 1 minute? Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Right now, you are my writing class of 10 students, bachelor's degree. English is your second language, right? And you are my writing students. Okay, so ready? Okay. So, students, I just read your narrative essays. I read your final drafts. They were pretty good. Before I give you your final drafts back, I went through each student's essay and I took one of your sentences and I put them on this paper. Okay, so every one of you have a sentence from this paper, or from your paper on here. What I want you to do in your groups of 4, I want you to get together, work together, and you need to edit all of these sentences. You need to correct them, okay? Now remember, you are students, not teachers, so you actually have to correct them, okay? So for this activity, go ahead and get in groups of 2 or 3 since there's less of us. So Maya, you'll have to join someone. So maybe you can join her. Okay, so I'm going to give you the class time today to work with your group. Go through and edit your paper. And we will look at these together as a class. So go ahead.
Show us.
Now don't work alone. You should be talking with your group.
We're just reading.
No, that's okay. I always have to say this though. Talk together with your group.
Just read the sentence.
Give them. Give them.
This is from one student.
It's hard to read.
It is.
So how this was done, perhaps.
In every
In those days, something like that. So this needs to be
give money just our
That's quite the sentence, huh?
yeah, maybe.
Okay, students, so you've had the whole class time to work on this. Students, you've had 40 minutes. Now, stop, go ahead and stop. Okay, so students, you've had the whole class time to work on this. Group 1, would you put your number 1 sentence on the board? Group 2, will you put your corrected number 2 on the board? Group 3, will you put corrected number 3? Okay? Alright. Your teachers again. Okay? This was to show you what I do in my class. So the students work the full hour on correcting these. They are in groups of 4. Every student has a paper because you don't want one student working on them. You want them all to work together. Okay, what does this do? First of all, have you ever had a class where students are talking about grammar problems for 40 minutes? No. But with this activity they talk about, no, I think it should be this. Are you sure? Because I'm sure it's this. Well, let's just see, maybe it's this. You know, they're talking about it. Do they use their native language? Yes, a lot of times because it's difficult to speak about grammar in their second language, and that's okay. They're still speaking about it. So I let them have their native language for that. 2, it shows them that every student, even the good students, make errors. Okay? 3, your outgoing students, when I give them this, they're like, oh, I'm number 6, you know? And which one are you? And maybe she's shy. I'll never tell, right? So students they can share their errors, they can laugh at them, or if they're embarrassed, they can just keep it to themselves and nobody has to know about it. So it's making errors accessible, it's showing that mistakes are what we learn from, and then at the end of the class, we look at each one together. Each groups, we go through them together really quickly. This takes 1 class period, and it's very important. The students know after each essay, after all 4 essays, they will have this day, okay? And they work together, and it's a great activity. It's effective because it's engaging. It's interesting to them because it's their work. It's their errors. Sometimes they say, I have no idea what this is supposed to say. And I say, how do you think I feel? I had to read the essays, right? So I say, if you just can't correct it, just move on to the next one, right? If maybe the author wants to say something different and we don't know. For example, if it's a fragment, okay? So if you're teaching students who are learning Georgian, you can do this with them. If you are teaching Georgian students, perhaps you want to take examples of their structural problems or their academic formula problems and the words they're using and have them work together to fix them. Okay, and once again, just like this. If you can't print them, you could always maybe project and the students all have to write it down in their notebooks. It's important though that they're all writing, because if one student is doing the work, then it's not engaging because other students can check out. Okay, so that's why I try to give each student one of these as an example, okay? So that's one thing we do. Then another step to the process is approach editing differently. And I have these little packets for you. Don't look through all of it. I will go through all of it, but we're going to look at the first 2 pages. So if you pass these 2 back there. Okay. All right, so if you look at the first and second essay, the first essay is a handwritten first draft. We always do the first draft in class as a timed essay. I found that it cuts down on plagiarism if I give them the first class and they must turn in their handwritten. The second essay is a different student, student B. This is their second draft essay. Okay? What do you notice about how I have edited their papers? So look through their papers. How am I editing these papers? What do you notice?
By circling.
Okay, by circling. I'm just circling. Okay?
Similar way.
Yeah, they both are similar. They're both similar. I'm doing the same thing on both. So one of them is that I'm circling. Am I correcting it?
Just underline.
Yeah. Well, I'm not underlining. I'm circling them, right? Do I correct them? Have I corrected anything here?
No.
No. But look, sometimes I give a clue. I give a clue if I think that maybe this is something a little difficult, the student might not know what it is, okay? And so I'll give a clue, but most of these errors the student knows because he or she has been studying English for years and years and years, and they're lazy errors. They're errors because these students did not read their paper. They type, or write, and give, right? I'm trying to teach them that the most important step to writing is reading what you wrote before you give, okay? So I circle even the little errors, everything, okay? And I have them look at these, okay? So I approach this editing differently by circling errors. I don't give any explicit correction. I just give hints when I feel they need it, okay? You could do this with Georgian, depending on their levels, okay? If they're very low Georgian level learners, you might have to focus on just a few types of errors. Maybe you can't do, these students have been studying English for years. Their English is still kind of bad, but they have the knowledge there, okay? All right, second step, what I do, if you'll turn to the 3rd page, it says writing self-assessment. I use this paper for my intermediate level writers. Okay, what they have to do, they have to go through all the circled errors and they have to mark them on their sheet, a little tally mark. And they have to give me one example from their paper. And then on the back, they have to write about their writing, okay? What are the strengths of your essay? What areas do you need to improve? What's the most difficult part about this? And what will you do differently on the next draft? Okay, so they have to fill out this whole sheet. Okay? Now if you turn the pages, there's 2 examples of my students who have done this. So student A and student B. So you can look and see how they have filled out their sheet. Okay? This sheet is worth 50 points of the final essay. It is worth a lot of points. They must do it, okay? All right, so if you turn to this page, this is a sheet I use for my advanced students, my bachelor degree students, and even my master's students if we're focusing on errors, okay? For this sheet, students have to write the error. What is the error? They have to write the error specific in their paper, like the sentence. If they can't write the full sentence, just a part of the sentence. But they can't just write the word. The word doesn't say anything, right? Then they have to make the correction. Then they have to write the rule, okay? So if you turn the page, you see 2 students. I have student 1, 4 pages, and student 2, 4 pages. That's from one essay. So, how long do you think this would take a student?
The whole day.
It usually takes a few hours, okay? How long does it take to read your essay before handing it into the teacher and fixing your lazy mistakes?
Half hour.
About 10 minutes, 5 minutes. The students learn this lesson immediately. They learn to spend time reading their essay and fixing as many things as they can so they have less of this to do. Okay? They hate this. They hate this, but they learn right away how important it is to read your essay. Because they say, do I have to record it if it's a small mistake, like I didn't capitalize the I? Yep. Because that shows you didn't proofread it. I'm trying to teach them how to be better proofreaders. You can do this with your Georgian students if they're more advanced. Okay, if they're not so advanced, I'd use the other form. Okay? For those of you teaching Georgian native speakers, maybe you could change the form to be more stylistic or academic features. You could change it how you need it. Okay?
Do
Yeah.
they get points and
Yes, this is a big part of their grade, and I'll talk about it. First of all, when they do this, they turn it in with their essay packet. Okay, 4 essays. Each essay has 3 drafts. Okay, first handwritten draft, second typed draft, third final draft. That's for intermediate level. My higher levels, I have 4 drafts. First handwritten, second is typed, and I focus on errors. Third is typed, and we focus on style, form, and content. And then fourth is the final. And they have to turn in the 4 drafts, plus the error sheet, plus the peer editing sheet. They have peer editing papers. All together, that's their packet. And they get a grade for every part of that. And I use a rubric for that. Okay? So this is an important part. And then what I do is, oh, here we go. So students record their errors. They look for their patterns. So once a student has done this, they can kind of go down and say, tense, 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 form, 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 tense, form. I've got a problem with verb tenses. So when they're writing, they realize, oh, last time I was writing a lot of tense. I need to go through my paper and read it and check my tenses. Or I have a lot of problems with verb forms or third person plural s. I need to, when I read my paper, I need to look for those forms. They are aware of the specific forms. If they've made a mistake 1 or 2 or 3 times in a whole essay, probably they don't need to focus on that as much. But they can easily see their specific, look, fragment, 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 fragment. Okay, I need to look at, be aware of fragments. Or maybe some students say, I have many fragments, but I don't really understand the rule. Well, now we can focus on this and go through it and give them the help that they need. Okay? So, this is the 3rd part of this step. Now, the 4th is we have conferences and reflective blogging. Do you have time in your semester for conferences with your students? Do you meet with them ever? Do you have that built in individually? Writing conferences? Okay, that's okay too. We have to have one-on-one conferences during midterm week, and then during finals it's optional. I do midterm usually. So at midterm, students will bring in, they will give me all of their error pattern sheets from the first 2 essays. We do 2 essays in the first part of the semester, 2 essays in the second part. And they will hand in all their sheets maybe a week before conferences, and I can look through and say, okay, yes, this really is this, right? If they have a problem, if they made a mistake with this and this, I can circle it and point it out. But I just check it. And when they come into their conferences, I say, okay, it looks like, you've got some fragment and verb tense problems. What are you doing? How will you correct this the next semester? What's your plan? What will you do? And they need to tell me what their plan is. And I tell them, you're doing great writing if you can get these two things. These are the two things we have to tackle. Okay? So that's telling them that they're fine as a writer, they just have these specific problems they need to tackle. Okay? And students will take that, and it kind of gives them a little bit of power. It says, okay, I'm not terrible, I just got to get these main things. Okay? As they do the error pattern sheets, you see their problems go down. Sometimes they're replaced by a new problem, but that's the point of errors, right? You fix one thing, and then you have a new thing, and that means you've grown. Okay? So the final step for this is their blogging. I told you all of my writing students have blogs. My low level all the way up to my master's, they all have a blog, a personal blog. Okay? They are blogging every week. Usually they blog on a topic related to the book or a topic related to what we're working on, but they have to do 2 error sheet blogs. One's at the midterm and one's at the final. They have to write about what were their most common patterns, what did they learn from them, how did this activity change their writing, what have they learned, what did they dislike, what did they like. Almost all of them will say, I hated this. It's the worst thing ever. But I can visually see, at the beginning of the semester I had fragment, 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 fragment. At the end I had 2 fragments. They can actually see their improvement. I don't have to tell them, oh, you're improving. What does that mean? Right? They can see it. And so I have 4 examples of 4 students' blogs. You can kind of read what they wrote about their error pattern sheets. Of course, I picked the best ones, but most of them are pretty honest. Like, I have students that say how much they hate it. They're very vocal, but they also tell me what they've learned from it. So take a moment and maybe read 1 or 2 of these. So I like from the first one of the students wrote, now I begin to follow a way which is called proofreading to check my grammar mistakes, you know? And another one that I read here, what did he say? Yeah, I understand that error patterns I used to make all the time because they are just a small problem. The students realize these are just a small part of their writing. It's not them as writers. It's just some challenge they have to fix, and they can continue. Because when they get a red piece of paper, it's can be overwhelming, and it just says, I just can't write. Especially students nowadays, because everything's short. Everything's text, Facebook status, Twitter status, everything's short. And to have big pieces of writing is very scary. It's very, it can be difficult for them. It's hard for them to keep their attention for it. So this breaks it up. It shows them their patterns. It shows them small areas they can work on to make big improvements in their writings instead of just having to do everything. Okay? So what we're doing here, okay, is we're giving students the power, right? The teachers always have the power, but we need to give some of that back to the students in order to see results. So I'll kind of review what I do here. Okay? First of all, on the drafts, drawing attention to the errors by circling, but not explicit correction. So those of you teaching native Georgian students, you would adapt this for how they would need, what they needed pointed out. Okay? Most errors at first, the first part of the semester, I really kind of circle almost all errors because I want to get them in the habit of proofreading. Towards the end of the semester, I really just focus on their main patterns, right? I'm not going to circle it if they didn't capitalize an I, right? But I am trying to make them get into the habit of you never turn in a paper without reading it once or twice or 3 times. Because as native speakers, we don't. Usually we don't, right? If you write something in your native language, almost always you read through it before you turn it in, right? So we have to teach this to our students. Give hints if needed. Okay? 2, the error pattern sheets. So I give my students about 15 minutes in class to start working on their error pattern sheets. The rest of it they have to do as home task. I give them a week or more to do it, but usually about a week to do it. How do I have them correct their errors? What if they don't know the reason why I circled it? What do you think they have them do? If I circle something and they don't know why I circled it.
They want to read and not to read.
They have to Google it.
Google it?
Or they
Yeah,
have
but
it
if you
from
just
the-
type in the word couldn't, Google won't tell you anything, right? It doesn't tell you why it's wrong.
Ask them to write to the classmates.
Okay. Okay, I tell them 4 things. They have to do 4 things to get the answer. Number 1, they have to open up their brain, go inside to the years of English they have learned, try to pull out why it's wrong. That's the first step. If they say, oh, it's not there. Step 2, open the book. Open your textbook. Try to go through the grammar points. Anything refreshed? Does anything look like what this was? Or does anything remind you of it? Okay? I still can't find it. Okay? Step 3, peers. Ask your peers. Ask someone who maybe is the good student. Do you know why do you think she circled this? You know, it gets them talking. Step 4, if the first 3 don't work, then you can ask the teacher. You know, and will I tell you the correct answer? I will give you hints. You should be finding it. You are the student, not me, and I am not Google. Right? Yeah, maybe your students will Google it, but they won't get very far. Google doesn't tell you why specific answers are wrong in an essay. You know, because the students still have to write the rule. They have to correct it. So even if Google's able to correct their sentence and give them the rule, then they still have to write it down. So they're still doing something. So if they can find it on Google, fine. That's fine by me, but they still have to write it down, which gets it into their brains. Okay? So then we move on to conferences. And you said you don't do one-on-one, but you could still do it through email. You can do it through their blogs even. You could leave blog comments. But email's probably more private. You can say, I've noticed from your error pattern sheets you're making these most common errors. What's your plan? Write back to me. This could be the conference. Okay? So I always tell students if they ever need to come to talk to me just any time about their patterns, or if they're frustrated, or if they feel stuck, come to me, we'll figure out a plan, or I could give them more guided practice on the areas they are struggling with. Okay? Then sometimes we have ending conferences. It depends on how the semester goes. Sometimes there's a need for it, and sometimes there's not. So you can just decide.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
In terms of conferences, do they or do you send them to the writing center?
They come to me.
Uh-huh.
They come to me. They have conferences with me.
So
Yeah.
which is the writing center. You are part of the writing center.
We have a writing center at our university. I don't send my students there because the people who are working in the writing center are not trained to work with ESL students.
I see.
They're trained to work with English native speaking students. So I often find that what happens when I send my ESL students to the writing center students just kind of write their paper for them. Because they don't know how to explain grammatical terms and functions, right? So for me, writing center is not an option. I show them where it is, and I show them that when they go into university, it's a good resource. But for my class personally, it just hasn't worked out very well. For you all, you might want to have the writing center be the conferences. That could be a good solution too. For Georgian native speakers, that could be the conferences for sure. So yeah.
Well, how we can work when we have
foreign students and Georgian students.
Uh-huh.
Well, they understand Georgian, they speak, but not really.
But the writing's
Yeah.
always worse than the speaking.
And they
yeah.
sometimes they can't really
Uh-huh.
understand what we're talking about.
Mhm,
So
yeah.
how are we gonna work with them? Because we had some kind of situation. They also had this kind of experience that those students who were not Georgian, they had low marks, and for them it was really hard to work, and I saw that they were cheating. So
How we dealt with that is we have separate classes.
yes, but sometimes it is like 4 or 5 students, and the problem is that they are afraid of free speaking. They are afraid, especially when they are guys,
Georgian, yeah.
because like they are afraid when
They
they
don't want to
laugh
look
at.
uncool.
Yeah,
So
so
you're talking about your Georgian learners.
yeah.
Correct, yeah. So, we have academic writing classes. We have freshman composition, which is a class that all freshman writers must take as an undergraduate student. It's called Academic Composition 150 and Academic Composition 151. It's 2 semesters, okay? So we have many different sections of this. And one section is for international students, for non-native speakers. They can choose to go into a class with American students if they wish, if their English is good enough, but we have one that's just for them. It's the same textbook, it's the same syllabus, but the teachers are teachers who are used to dealing with students who do not speak English as their first language. So this is the best way, because if a student is put into a class of native speakers and their language is not up to par, they just will not be able to do it. You probably found that.
Yeah.
They just won't do it, which is a waste of time. So my answer is, and this is difficult, if there is any way in the sometime future that there could be a separate class made for them, same syllabus, same books, but it's focusing on these issues, that's the best way to go. If not, you're going to have to make 2 classes in one. You'll have to do it. You're going to have to do it at a 2-tiered level. You can't expect someone who doesn't have the language to perform with someone who does. It's an impossible expectation. So that's something you'll have to talk about within your department. How you'll have to have a 2-tiered class. So you'll have to have a rubric of grading for the native speaker and for the non-native speakers, and they'll have a few different issues. There's just, did your non-native speakers have failing grades? And they will always have failing
Most
grades.
of the time.
Yeah, they'll mostly have failing grades, and their confidence is gonna go, and that's not what we want as teachers. So, in my opinion, that's the only solution. That's the only solution. You have to have 2-tiered. So you have to tell them, I expect the same things from you, but we'll approach it differently. And maybe I can talk a bit more about that tomorrow. We can talk about some strategies for doing that. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but it might be good to brainstorm some ideas how we can make that work. Okay. So back to this, let me finish up here. Okay, so our last one, students blogging. The students become very, very friendly with their blogs. I let them, they can decorate it, they put pictures on it, they have colors on it. It's their personal space. And that's why I'm trying to train them that writing it's their time to write. But we also want to reflect on what we're doing academically and get them thinking about their errors, talking about their errors with their classmates, reflecting on them, correcting them. They're always doing it. They're always involved in it. So, if we go back to my goals I talked about, create successful editing and proofreading habits. The error pattern sheet does that from the very first time. They learn right away very quickly how important that is. Get students to actively notice their most common error patterns. They can't ignore them. They have written them down, and I don't have to do any of that. I'm just circling, bloop, 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 which is faster than correcting. Okay, so actually, my time spent with the papers is less. Their time has increased, but they're students, and they're there to learn, and they will. Okay? Have students play a more active role in the drafting process. They're constantly making a draft, they're constantly recording, talking about it with their peers, talking about it with me, and thinking about it. Increase their autonomy, their ability to find their own mistakes. Once they understand their patterns, they're more aware and they're more able to look for them. If they don't know that they have a pattern, they don't know what to look for. They just think everything's terrible and difficult. Okay? And then finally, build confidence. I mean, you can read in the blogs, all of the blogs, the students are like, this was by far the worst activity and the best activity. They're like, I've never in my life had to record my mistakes. I've never, you know, and they can see they're making progress. So, you know, I've done this whole past year, last 2 semesters, and I have seen great results, great improvements in their writing and their confidence in their ability to do it. So, take what you can from this. You can, oh, there's my sources. Always into the sources. You might have to adapt it, change it for your needs, but you'll have the electronic versions of everything that you can use. So, 10 minutes, yoo-hoo! I brought some books that we use. We switch out our books, so we don't use the same book every semester. Why? Because some students still fail, and we don't want them to come back into the class already having done the whole book. So we usually have a 3-book rotation, a spring, summer, fall. So spring, summer, fall, and then every other year we go back and say, okay, let's completely change out the spring and the fall books. There's new books out, and we revise them. So we have a spring, summer, fall. So this is an example of a textbook we would use with our undergraduate students. It's got, all these are different writing styles. We've got exemplification, narration, description, process, cause and effect, compare and contrast, classification, definition, and argument. So it's got, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 essays. We can't write 9 essays in a semester. Like I said, the average is 4. So this book would either be split up between semesters, or the teacher, we would tell the teacher they can choose 4, because we still want our teachers to be autonomous a bit. So we give teachers the ability to choose 4, or as a department we'll say, for this level of students, they need cause and effect, compare, contrast. They need these 4 essays before the next class. So, and then we'll go through them, and we learn the essay writing skills as we're preparing for an essay. So, like I said, it's a little bit different than you do it. I think I was reading your syllabus. You talk about structure and you do a lot with the structure, and then the last part they are working freely. Is that how? So, we're learning about structure, form, maybe a grammatical point, and then they're drafting their narrative essay. Doing the drafts, then they turn in the packet. Okay? Then we move on to the cause and effect essay, and we're learning about more forms, more structure, more ways we can make our essay better, and then they're drafting, and then cause and effect. Then midterm semester, and then the last 2. So they're producing throughout the whole semester, because like I said, they should be constantly writing and doing this. So I know, yeah, which way is better, I don't know. You just got to figure that out, and maybe you already have your system. It sounds like you've talked about it, and if it works for you, it works. We found this way works for us because it's constantly giving them practice. And then what most of our teachers do at the end of the semester, for their final, some teachers have a portfolio. I don't collect portfolios because I've read their stuff all semester. For my final, they can go back and choose the essay they had the lowest grade on, and they can rework it and rewrite it, and they will get a higher score based on how much improvement they did from the original. So they turn in their original packet, all of their drafts, the grade sheet, with the new revised one they can do any of the essays. So I try to tell them writing's never permanent. There's always chances to improve yourself. Even books get new editions every few years. There's always a chance to improve. So that's my final for the class, having them spend time with something they've already written. Another book we use, let me throw it, is this little one. which the students like because it's small. It's more of a handbook, like just some tips and techniques, but then it's got a little workbook to go with it, so the teacher can assign some assignments that focus on strategies in here, but it's really the side to the writing. So we use this a lot with more advanced students who have already had a writing class. Maybe they're not perfect, but they are kind of familiar already with this style. We'll use this. Here are some other ones we use. This would be from high intermediate students. They're learning about paragraphs and they're starting to put it together into essays here. And I think there's even a section in here on the research essay that gives lots of examples and so on. And then this would be maybe advanced when they're starting to learn about academic writing. So how to do research, and let's see, what are their essays they're doing here. So this is organized by topic. So we've got art appreciation, psychology, law, career, literary analysis, and they have all these different focuses. Academic focus, critical thinking focus, rhetorical focus, language and grammar focus. So maybe it could be similar to some of your books. And then finally, this is my favorite book. This is called Reading Critically, Writing Well. This is highly academic. We use this for our bachelor's degree freshman composition class. So I recommend if you're teaching English students here, this would be good for your master's level students. This is what we use for bachelor students who have already had lots of writing classes, and your bachelor students, I assume, have not. This would not be for them. Okay. This would be for your master's students. These are the essays they learn to write: autobiography, an observation essay, reflection essay, explaining concepts essay, evaluation essay, arguing for a position essay, speculation about causes or effects, proposal to solve a problem. So I love this book because it introduces the essay style, tells a little about what it is, and then it has 4 or 5 example essays of that style that students can read. And at the end of each essay, they have lots of critical thinking and critical evaluation activities for that essay. So it's teaching students that just because it's published doesn't mean you can't question it and look at it critically. And why did they write this? Or who is the author? Why is the author saying this? What degrees does he or she have? Why is he or she writing about this? What is he or she trying to convince you? Is he or she writing for a certain audience or for everyone? Getting students to think about these things. They have to know when they do research. And then at the end it gives them help in writing their own version of that. So it's these are just some books. And I don't know, if you want a chance to look through them, I could leave them somewhere. Where would be a easy place for you
Library.
The library or with Maya?
Well, the center, they are all there.
Yeah.
By the way, this one is already the
Yes, I already gave this one.
This is
Yeah.
the presents.
And I think I'll probably leave
Yeah,
most
some
of
of
these
the
because I don't
books
want to take
as
them
well.
back.
So you'll find them all in room E221.
221, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Which is going to be our room.
The writing
Wow.
center.
The writing center.
Right now it's the center of my lonely desk. So anyway, I hope maybe there's some ideas you can use. Tomorrow maybe we can talk about brainstorm what we'll do with the mixed classes. But tomorrow we have our last 2 sessions, and I think you'll get some ideas from them as well. So does anyone have any final questions before I let you go? It was a lot of info, I know. But do you think you could give a presentation or modify it and then give to your colleagues?
Yeah.
This kind of presentation, you might want to try it first with your classes and then modify it from what you have done, because this presentation is based off what I have done. So that would be a good thing to think about this year, trying some different techniques and then making a presentation for that. I encourage you to do so it would be effective. So, okay, well,
Thank you.
thanks for staying so long with me and listening to me talk. It's hard in this room, right? Because I feel like I want to get close. All right, and you can keep those packets. If you want to use them, you can refer to them, or if you want to use them for a notebook, you can cut them up and staple them and write on the blank pages.